They said it was just another day inside Rikers. But that day, the hallway outside Dorm 3C looked like a war zone. A correctional officer was screaming into his radio. "Inmate down. We need medical now." Blood was everywhere, smeared across the concrete floor, dripping down the walls. And in the middle of it all lay an inmate named Darius Cole, barely breathing, his uniform soaked red. He'd been stabbed 7 times, all before the guards could even unlock the gate. Other inmates stood frozen. Some whispered. Others smiled. Because at Rikers, violence isn't shocking. It's routine. But what no one knew at that moment was that this attack wasn't random. It was planned. And the reason behind it would soon expose one of the darkest secrets inside Rikers Island. Beat pause. So the question is, how did a place meant for justice become America's most violent prison? Fade out. Title card appears. Rikers Island. The most violent prison in America? Rikers Island sits on a small patch of land between Queens and the Bronx. To outsiders, it's just another correctional facility. But to those who've been inside, it's a world ruled by fear. With nearly 10,000 inmates packed together, murderers, gang members, and people just waiting for trial. It's not a prison, it's a pressure cooker. One wrong look, one wrong word can get you killed. When Darius Cole first arrived, he wasn't a hardened criminal. He was 24 years old, arrested for a robbery gone wrong. A street kid from Brooklyn trying to act tough. But inside Rikers, acting tough can get you in serious trouble. He was placed in Dorm 3C, a block controlled by the Trinitarios gang. The guards didn't care. They just threw him in and locked the door. At first, Darius kept quiet. He followed orders, kept his head down, did what the others did. But inside Rikers, even silence can make you a target. Because when you don't belong to a crew, everyone thinks you're weak. One night, as lights went out, a voice from the next bunk whispered, "You ain't from here, right?" It was Malik, a calm, older inmate who had been at Rikers for over 8 years. Malik warned him, "Keep your eyes open. If they test you, don't fold. Never fold." But that warning came too late. 3 days later, Darius was eating lunch in the cafeteria when it happened. A tray slammed into his face. Boom. Rice and beans splattered everywhere. The whole room froze. Then someone shouted, "Yo, new boy think he tough now." The Trinitarios surrounded him, 5 against 1. The guards? They just watched from behind the glass. Because unless someone was dying, they didn't step in. Darius tried to fight back, swinging wildly, but the gang beat him down until he couldn't move. Later that night, Malik helped him up. "You see? This place don't need a reason," he said. "Violence is the reason." Over the next few weeks, Darius healed in silence. He learned how to move differently. Never walk alone, never talk too much, and never, ever look anyone in the eyes for too long. But as he grew stronger, something inside him began to change. Fear turned into anger, and that anger was about to explode. It started small. Darius joined a few inmates who hustled for cigarettes and phone time. Then, little by little, he earned respect. By the end of his 2nd month, he wasn't the scared new guy anymore. He was building something, a small crew of his own. Malik tried to warn him, "Don't play the same game they play, D. It only ends one way." But Darius didn't listen. Because in Rikers, power is the only protection. Then came the night everything changed. A rumor spread that one of the Trinitarios had stolen from Darius' stash a few packs of cigarettes and some commissary goods. Small stuff, but inside Rikers, that's enough to start a war. So when lights went out, Darius made his move. He found the thief in the showers. Words turned to shoves, shoves turned to punches, and punches turned into something much worse. One of Darius's guys pulled out a sharpened toothbrush, a shank, and before anyone could stop it, it was in the man's side. Once, twice. Screams echoed down the corridor. The alarms blared, and the guards came rushing in. But it was already too late. The blood had already been spilled. And Darius Cole, the same kid who came to Rikers afraid, was now part of what made it the most violent prison in America. Beat pause. But what happened next would make even that stabbing look like nothing. It started with a sound, a single, heavy thud against the metal door of Dorm 3C. Then another, and another. At first, the guards thought it was just noise, inmates venting their anger like they always do. But that night it wasn't noise. It was a signal. Inside the dorm, whispers moved like wildfire. The Trinitarios are coming. They want payback for what Darius did. The air felt heavy. Every inmate could feel it, that electric tension right before violence breaks out. And then all hell broke loose. A metal chair flew across the room, smashing into a window. Someone screamed. It's on. In seconds, the dorm turned into chaos. Inmates were fighting with anything they could find, broom handles, broken trays, even sharpened spoons. The lights flickered as the alarms blared through the halls. Darius and Malik ducked behind a table, trying to stay out of the middle. But that didn't last long. A group of Trinitarios spotted them. Yo, that's him. That's the one who did it. Darius froze. Malik shouted, "Move." The two ran for the back corner, where the exit gate was locked. Fists, kicks, screams, everything blurred together. Someone grabbed Darius from behind, and before he could react, a blade sliced across his arm. Blood poured out. He fell to the floor, gasping, while the fight raged on above him. The guards didn't step in. They just shouted through the glass, "Everyone down! Everyone down now!" But no one listened. Because at Rikers, order doesn't come from guards. It comes from whoever's willing to spill the most blood. Then came the sound that stopped everything. A loud bang from the watchtower. A warning shot. The fight froze. Smoke filled the air. And one by one, the inmates dropped to the ground. Beat pause. When the lights came back on, the floor was covered in blood and bodies. 6 inmates were injured. 2 were dead. And Darius Cole was barely conscious. The next morning, Rikers Island was on total lockdown. No movement. No phones. No visitors. Officers in riot gear stormed through each dorm, pulling inmates from their bunks and dragging them into isolation. They were hunting for the ones who started it, the spark that lit the riot. And Darius? He was the prime suspect. They found him in the infirmary, his arm stitched and bandaged. He couldn't even lift his head when the sergeant walked in. The officer slammed a folder on the table. "You started this, Cole. You and that old man, what's his name?" "Malik." Darius said nothing. He just stared at the wall, silent. The sergeant leaned closer. "People died because of you. You think you're some kind of boss now." But Darius wasn't listening. He was thinking about something else. Because Malik, the one man who tried to protect him, hadn't been seen since the riot. Rumor was he didn't make it out of dorm 3C alive. Days turned into weeks. Rikers was still on edge. Every hallway smelled like bleach and fear. The guards looked more nervous than the inmates. And behind every door, someone whispered, "They're going to shut the place down soon." But they didn't. Because Rikers Island doesn't shut down. It just gets worse. After the riot, state investigators came in. They interviewed staff, inmates, anyone who saw what happened. They wanted to know, how did a fight over cigarettes turn into a massacre? The truth was ugly. Guards admitted they ignored warnings. Inmates said weapons were hidden in plain sight. And surveillance cameras? Half of them didn't even work that night. It wasn't just negligence. It was a system built on chaos. One officer told investigators, "Every day here feels like a powder keg. We just pray it doesn't explode again." But while the world outside debated who to blame, inside Rikers, nothing changed. The same overcrowded cells. The same broken systems. The same fear. Darius sat in solitary confinement, staring at the small slit of light above his bed. He hadn't heard from Malik. No one would tell him what really happened. Until one night, a guard slipped a folded note under his door. It had only 3 words. "He's still alive." When Darius read those words, his heart started racing. If Malik was alive, that meant one thing. Someone had hidden him. The question was why. Days later, a new guard came to escort Darius to medical. But instead of taking him to the infirmary, the guard led him down a long, dark hallway he'd never seen before. At the end of it was a metal door, unmarked. No sign, no camera. The guard unlocked it. And inside, sitting alone in a dimly lit room, was Malik. He looked different, tired, bruised, but alive. When he saw Darius, he managed a small smile. "Told you not to play their game, didn't I?" Darius didn't know what to say. He just asked, "What's happening, Malik? Why'd they hide you?" Malik leaned forward. "Because I saw something that night, something I wasn't supposed to see." Darius frowned. "What do you mean?" Malik's eyes went cold. The riot wasn't just an accident. It was set up. Someone inside wanted it to happen. Beat pause. And that's when Darius realized. The real danger at Rikers wasn't just the inmates. It was the system itself. Malik's voice dropped to a whisper. "They think everyone in here's too scared or too broken to notice," he said. "But I saw the guards open that gate before the riot started. They knew what was coming." Darius blinked. "You saying the officers let it happen?" Malik nodded slowly. "One of the gangs was paying off a CO, said they'd keep the violence contained, make an example out of someone. But it got out of control." He leaned back against the wall, breathing hard. They needed chaos that night, a distraction. Something else went down while everyone was fighting. Darius felt his stomach tighten. What could be worse than a riot? Malik looked at him for a long moment. An escape. The word hung in the air like smoke. Malik told him everything. During the riot, while the officers were focused on Dorm 3C, a small group of inmates in another block tried to break out through the laundry bay. The fight had been a smokescreen, but the plan failed. 2 inmates made it to the outer fence before they were caught. One disappeared completely, and instead of admitting a security breach, the administration blamed the bloodshed on gang activity. Malik said he'd overheard the officers arguing afterward. They weren't talking about stopping violence. They were arguing about who to pin it on. Darius could barely breathe. He'd been used. His fight, his anger, his name, all part of their cover-up. Malik grabbed his hand. "You need to get word out. Let the world know what really happened here." But that was easier said than done. Every letter was read, every call recorded, and anyone who talked too much disappeared. That night, Darius lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere outside, the city lights flickered across the East River. So close, yet impossible to reach. He realized then that surviving Rikers wasn't about being the toughest. It was about knowing who was pulling the strings. A week later, an investigator came to see Darius. A woman from the Department of Corrections Oversight Team, badge clipped to her belt, expression sharp. She said she'd heard Darius might have information about the riot. If he talked, maybe his sentence could be reduced. But Darius remembered Malik's warning. "They'll twist whatever you say. Don't trust them." So he played dumb. "I don't know nothing," he said. The investigator stared at him for a long time, then leaned in. "Cole, you think these people care about you? You're a pawn to them. Help me, and you can walk out of here alive." For the first time, Darius saw fear in her eyes. Not pity, but fear. It made him wonder, what exactly was Rikers hiding that even the investigators were scared of? After she left, Darius knew one thing for sure. If he stayed silent, they'd bury him. If he talked, they might kill him. Either way, the truth had a price. 2 nights later, the guards came for Malik. No explanation. Just keys, handcuffs, and orders. Darius shouted through the bars. "Where are you taking him?" One of the guards smirked. "Protective custody." Then he whispered. Or maybe not. They dragged Malik away. That was the last time Darius saw him. By morning, word spread that Malik had been transferred to another facility. But no paperwork, no transport record, nothing. It was like he'd vanished off the face of the earth. And Darius realized, if they could erase Malik that easily, he could be next. He had to move fast. He had to get the truth out before Rikers buried it for good. Beat pause. But how do you expose corruption when the people running the prison are the ones controlling every door, every camera, every life? Days passed like years. Rikers Island went quiet again, but it was the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. Guards talked less. Inmates whispered more. Everyone felt something coming. Something worse than another riot. Darius knew he had a choice. Stay silent and rot, or take the biggest risk of his life, expose Rikers from the inside. But how do you send a message when every word, every letter, every phone call is monitored? That's where Marcos came in. Marcos was a jailhouse runner, a guy who could move information through the system for the right price. Cigarettes, food, even favors from guards. He had a way to get letters off the island. It wasn't safe, but it worked. Darius handed him a folded sheet of paper one night, written in tiny letters. Inside, he described everything: the setup, the riot, the missing inmate, Malik's disappearance, and the cover-up. Marcos promised he'd get it out. Said he had a contact in the Bronx who worked with reporters. But in Rikers, secrets don't stay secret long. By the next morning, everyone knew Darius had written something he shouldn't have. And that meant only one thing: someone had snitched. They came for him during dinner. 3 inmates from another dorm. No words. No warning. Just fists. They dragged Darius behind the food line, out of sight of the cameras. One of them hissed, "You think you can write about us? You think you can talk about the COs?" A punch landed in his ribs. Another across his jaw. Then a kick that knocked him flat. When it was over, he could barely breathe. He lay on the floor, tasting blood, staring at the ceiling light flickering above him. And that's when he saw it. A shadow moving on the other side of the glass. A guard, just standing there, watching. No radio call. No backup. Nothing. He wasn't supposed to see it. But Darius realized in that moment. The guards hadn't stopped the attack because they ordered it. That beating was a message. Stop talking. But Darius didn't stop. Because by then, he understood something. The people running Rikers weren't trying to control the violence. They were using it. 2 weeks later, news broke. A small online paper published an anonymous letter titled, "Inside Rikers, they want us to kill each other." The details matched everything Darius had written. Names, dates, even the riot timeline. It spread fast. TV stations picked it up. Human rights groups called for investigations. And for the first time, people outside Rikers started paying attention. Reporters demanded access. Politicians made speeches. The mayor called it an isolated incident. But everyone inside knew the truth. It wasn't isolated. It was the norm. The letter had reached the world. But now Darius had a target on his back. The guards started watching him closer. Transfers were denied. Mail stopped arriving. And then one night, his cell door opened quietly after lights out. A guard stood there, silent, holding cuffs. "Get up, Cole. You're being moved." Darius didn't argue. He'd been waiting for this. But something didn't feel right. It was past midnight. Transfers never happened that late. They walked him down a narrow corridor toward the ferry dock. The air smelled like rain and diesel. No paperwork, no escort team, no other inmates. Darius stopped. "Where's the van?" The guard didn't answer, just pushed him forward. And that's when Darius realized. This wasn't a transfer. It was a setup. He could see it in the guard's eyes. The same look he saw the night Malik was taken. They were about to make him disappear too. He stumbled back, trying to fight, but the guard swung his baton hard. Everything went black. When Darius woke up, he was somewhere else. Cold floor, no windows, no sound but a dripping pipe. A single light buzzed above him. And taped to the wall was a note in bold black marker. "You should have stayed quiet." When Darius opened his eyes, the air felt wrong, cold, heavy, and stale. He wasn't in the main dorm anymore. This place was silent. Too silent. No shouting. No clanging doors. No echo of footsteps in the hall. Just the hum of a single flickering light. He tried to stand, but his legs were weak. The cell looked different, smaller, older. The walls were chipped concrete, damp with mold. There was no number on the door, no window, no name tag. He yelled, "Hey, anybody there?" No answer. Then he heard it, a faint cough from somewhere down the corridor. He pressed his ear against the cold metal door and called out again, "Who's there?" A voice answered, hoarse and trembling. "You're in the ghost block, kid." Darius froze. He'd heard rumors about it before, a hidden section of Rikers where inmates vanished without trace. No records, no visits, no mail. They called it the ghost block because once you were sent there, you were as good as dead. For the next 2 days, Darius barely ate. The only sound he heard was the metal tray sliding through the slot twice a day. No guard spoke to him. No one told him why he was there. Then one night, he heard the cough again, closer this time. He called out, "Yo, what's your name?" The voice rasped back, "Cell 12. The man refused to give his real name. Said names didn't matter here. Over the next few nights, they talked through the vents. Cell 12 told him he'd been in the ghost block for over a year. No paperwork, no hearing, nothing. He'd been a jailhouse informant who tried to report a guard smuggling drugs. Next day, he was gone from the main unit. "They bury us here," Cell 12 said. "Anybody who talks too much, anybody who knows too much, this is where they end up." Darius's stomach twisted. So it was true. The cover-up ran deeper than anyone outside could imagine. But then Cell 12 said something that made Darius's heart stop. "I wasn't the only one they brought down here. There was another guy named was Malik." For a second, Darius couldn't breathe. "Malik? He's here." Cell 12 went quiet. Then he said softly, "Was. He was here." Darius felt his chest tighten. "What do you mean was?" The voice on the other side of the wall sighed. "They took him out a few weeks ago. Middle of the night, just like you. Never saw him again." Silence filled the cell. It felt like the walls were closing in, pressing against his chest. Malik, the man who'd saved him, warned him, and tried to tell the truth, was gone. For the first time since he'd arrived at Rikers, Darius felt something worse than fear. He felt alone. But then, Cell 12 said one more thing. "Before they took him, he left something for you." Darius leaned against the wall. "What is it?" "You'll see," the man whispered. "Check under the sink pipe tomorrow after they bring breakfast." That night, Darius barely slept. His mind ran wild with questions. If Malik had known he'd end up here, what could he have possibly left behind? When morning came, Darius waited until the guard slid his tray through the slot. After the footsteps faded, he crawled to the corner of his cell and pulled at the rusted pipe beneath the sink. Something small fell out, a piece of paper wrapped in plastic. He unrolled it carefully. It was a note, written in Malik's handwriting. It said, "If you're reading this, it means they found you too. Don't lose hope. The cameras in this block don't work. The wiring's dead. That means you can move unseen. There's a vent behind the toilet. It leads to the old maintenance tunnel. Follow the sound of dripping water. Trust no one but yourself." Darius's hands shook. He couldn't tell if this was real or some cruel trick. But then he remembered Malik's words from months ago. "Don't play their game, D. Change the rules." And for the first time, Darius wasn't thinking about surviving. He was thinking about escaping. Beat pause. But escape from Rikers Island isn't just impossible. It's suicidal. Still, as he stared at the vent in the wall, he knew there was no turning back. Because staying meant dying in the dark and disappearing like everyone else in the ghost block. The cell was dead quiet that night. No guards, no sounds, just the slow, steady drip, drip, drip from somewhere deep in the wall. Darius sat in the dark, staring at the vent Malik mentioned. It was small, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through, covered in layers of rust and grime. He listened for footsteps, waited until the last round of checks passed, then began to move. He pulled the metal food tray apart, bending its edge into a sharp wedge. Each twist of the screw made his hands ache. Each creak of metal made his heart race. Finally, After what felt like hours, the vent cover popped loose. He froze, listening. No footsteps. No alarms. He took a deep breath and crawled inside. The tunnel was tighter than he expected. Narrow, damp, and choking with dust. He had to crawl on his elbows, dragging himself inch by inch through the darkness. The deeper he went, the louder the dripping water became. And with every echo, he remembered Malik's note. Follow the sound of dripping water. After a few minutes, he reached a split. 2 paths. One led upward, faintly glowing from a vent light. The other led downward into blackness. He hesitated. Then, from somewhere far below, he heard something. A faint metallic clang. Like a door closing. Someone else was down there. Darius crawled downward. The tunnel curved sharply, the air growing colder with every move. The dripping grew louder until he reached a broken grate that opened into a small chamber. He dropped down quietly. The floor was wet, puddles reflecting the flicker of a single broken light. Pipes ran along the walls, covered in slime and cobwebs. And in the center of the room was a stack of boxes, government boxes, stamped with the letters, "Doc, confidential property." Darius opened one. Inside were files, inmate records, reports, and disciplinary logs. But these weren't normal files. They were for inmates marked transferred. Only they weren't transferred. He recognized some of the names. Guys from his dorm who disappeared months ago. Their files had no signatures, no release dates, just a single word typed in red ink. Void. Darius's hands shook. This wasn't a prison anymore. It was a burial ground for the forgotten. He flipped through more files, until one name stopped him cold. Malik Sanders. He opened it. Inside was a faded photo, his intake form, and a final note. Deceased. No record of incident. Darius's stomach dropped. He knew then. Malik hadn't been transferred. He'd been erased. Suddenly, he heard it. Footsteps echoing through the tunnel. Slow. Heavy. Getting closer. He quickly stuffed Malik's file under his shirt and pressed himself against the wall. The light above flickered again, and a shadow appeared in the entrance. It was a guard, flashlight in hand, gun on his hip. He was humming softly, like he'd been here before. Darius held his breath. The guard walked past the first tunnel opening, shining his light across the boxes. Then he stopped. Something caught his eye, the vent cover lying on the floor. "Who's down here?" the guard barked. No response. He stepped closer, boots splashing through the puddles. Darius could feel his pulse pounding in his neck. If the guard turned that light even an inch to the left, he'd see him. The beam swept across the walls, pausing just for a second near the corner where Darius hid. Then the radio on the guard's shoulder crackled. "Unit 4, you copy? Report to C Block. We've got movement." The guard hesitated, cursed under his breath, then turned back toward the tunnel. His footsteps faded away. Darius exhaled, slowly, silently. But as the echo disappeared, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. Behind one of the old boxes was a rusted metal door, barely visible under the grime. On it, written in faded paint, were 2 words: Archive Room. Darius pushed the boxes aside and tried the handle. It was stiff, but it turned. Inside was a narrow hallway lined with shelves and old computer monitors. Everything looked untouched for years. He found stacks of hard drives, folders labeled security footage, restricted, and broken cameras. He realized where he was. This was where Rikers stored its erased history. Every missing video, every lost report, every malfunctioning camera. All hidden down here. He wiped the dust off one of the monitors. When he hit the switch, the screen flickered to life. Static at first. Then an image appeared, blurry gray, but real. It was footage from the night of the riot. Darius leaned in. He saw the dorm, inmates fighting, smoke, chaos. Then, right before the camera cut off, 2 guards opened the main gate from the inside. He froze. Malik had been right. It had all been staged. But that wasn't the worst part. Before the screen went dark, he saw something else. A man being dragged across the floor by 2 officers. The timestamp, 1 hour after the riot ended. The man's face was swollen, bloody, but unmistakable. It was Malik. Beat pause. And from the way the guards were carrying him, Malik wasn't breathing. Darius stared at the frozen frame on the screen. Malik's lifeless body, dragged through the halls like trash. His throat went dry. His hands trembled. This wasn't just a murder. It was a cover-up. He looked around the archive room again, scanning for anything that could prove it. Something he could take. Something that couldn't disappear like Malik did. That's when he saw it. A row of old flash drives, each labeled with a date and time. One matched the night of the riot. He snatched it, slipped it into his waistband, and turned off the monitor. But just as he stepped back toward the tunnel, a loud metallic clank echoed behind him. The door had shut, and when he turned around, the lock light glowed red. Darius ran to the door and yanked the handle. It didn't move. He kicked it, slammed his shoulder against it. Nothing. He was trapped. Then the lights began to flicker, once, twice, and suddenly a low humming sound filled the room. It was the ventilation fans, the same ones that had been silent for years. But the air coming through wasn't clean. It reeked of bleach and ammonia. Darius coughed, backing away from the vents. He realized what was happening. They were gassing the room. Someone up there had seen the camera feed come back online. They knew someone had found the archive. And now they were making sure no one ever walked out of it. He scrambled around, searching for another exit. The walls were solid concrete, no vents large enough to crawl through. The air grew thicker. His eyes burned. Then he spotted it, a small maintenance grate near the floor. He dropped down, pried it open with his tray wedge, and started crawling through. The tunnel was smaller this time, barely enough space to move. He dragged himself forward, coughing, eyes watering. Behind him, the hiss of gas grew louder. But he didn't stop. After what felt like forever, the tunnel ended. In a vertical shaft with a rusty ladder. He climbed. Each rung creaked under his weight. When he finally reached the top, he pushed open the metal cover and found himself inside an old, unused laundry room. He collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. He'd made it out, but he was far from safe. The sound of footsteps broke the silence. Darius froze. The door creaked open, and a flashlight beam swept across the floor. A voice spoke quietly. "Didn't think you'd make it this far." It was Officer Rourke, one of the guards who worked Malik's dorm. Big, scarred, and always too calm for someone who'd seen that much violence. Rourke stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He pointed the light at Darius. "You've been busy," he said. "You shouldn't have gone down there." Darius stayed quiet, clutching the flash drive hidden under his shirt. Rourke sighed. "You think you're the first one to find that place?" he said softly. "Malik thought he was too. That's why he's gone now." Darius's heart raced. So it was true. Rourke was involved. But then Rourke's voice changed, quieter, shakier. "I told them not to do it," he muttered. "They didn't listen. They said it had to be done. Said the footage would ruin everything." He looked up, eyes dark. "You're lucky I found you first." He tossed a key across the floor. "Cell Block C, laundry chute. 3rd shift. Don't be late." And just like that, Rourke turned and left, leaving Darius alone in the dark. What did he mean by "don't be late"? Was it a warning? Or a trap? Rourke stood there, chest heaving, flashlight trembling in his hand. Vega lay motionless at his feet. "Move," Rourke whispered. "Now." Darius hesitated, but the look in Rourke's eyes told him this wasn't a setup. Not tonight. He followed him down the corridor, ducking through side doors until they reached an old utility stairwell. Rourke locked the door behind them. "You've got about 10 minutes before someone finds him," he said. "After that, every door on this floor locks down." Darius swallowed hard. "Why are you helping me?" Rourke leaned against the wall, staring at the cracked concrete. "Because I was part of it," he said quietly. "The cover-ups, the fake transfers, the reports that went missing." He paused, eyes cold. But when Malik died, I couldn't do it anymore. Darius's pulse pounded in his ears. You killed him. Rourke shook his head. No. But I was there when they did. 2 officers, Vega and Henson. Malik figured out the riot was staged to hide the warden's deals. They beat him to death in the showers, then dumped him through the old tunnel system. His file got marked void, like it never happened. Silence. Heavy. Unbearable. Rourke reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded map. There's a service chute behind the incinerator. Leads straight to the outer wall. You'll have to crawl through steam pipes and ash, but it's open. I made sure of it. He pressed the map into Darius's hands. When you get out, find someone named Detective Heller. He's been trying to expose Rikers for years. Tell him the archive room is real. Then Rourke looked him in the eye. If you make it, you never saw me. Darius ran. The alarm hadn't gone off yet, but it would. Every second mattered. He followed the map through the boiler room, past rows of pipes spewing clouds of steam. The heat was unbearable. His skin burned. His lungs screamed for air. But he didn't stop. Finally, he reached it. The incinerator room. The chute was small, blackened with soot, the air thick and hot. He tied the flash drive around his neck and took one last look back. Then he climbed in. The metal walls seared his palms as he slid downward into darkness. The smell of burnt fabric and ash filled his nose. But just as he thought he'd reached the end, he slammed against a grate. It wouldn't budge. He kicked it again and again, each hit echoing in the metal shaft. Then, with one final strike, it broke loose. He crawled out onto cold, wet gravel. The night air hit him like a wave. For the first time in years, he was outside. He looked up. Barbed wire. Floodlights sweeping across the yard. But beyond that, the black water of the East River. He sprinted. Bullets whizzed past as alarms blared behind him. He jumped. The water swallowed him whole. Morning came. Detective Aaron Heller sat in his car outside the Queen's precinct when a call came in. A fisherman had found someone near the shoreline, half dead, clutching a soaked flash drive in his hand. The man was barely conscious. All he said before passing out was one word: Rikers. Heller took the drive. Hours later, he played it. What he saw changed everything. Footage of a riot. Guards opening gates, staging chaos, dragging inmates through secret corridors. Files showing names, dates, and fake transfers. Even reports signed by the warden himself. The evidence was undeniable. Within weeks, the story broke. Rikers Island, the most violent prison in America. News stations called it the biggest correctional scandal in decades. The warden resigned. Several officers, including Vega and Henson, were indicted. And somewhere, deep in witness protection, Darius watched the news in silence. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just whispered one name: Malik. Rikers Island is still standing. The cells are still filled. The screams still echo through the halls. But something changed after that night. People started paying attention. Cameras stayed on longer. Reporters stopped taking transfer for an answer. And though the system tried to bury the truth again, it couldn't. Because somewhere, on a forgotten hard drive, in a folder marked archive room, the real story of Rikers Island still lives. Proof of what happens when power goes unchecked, and when silence becomes the deadliest weapon of all. They called Rikers Island a correctional facility. But the truth? It corrected nothing. It destroyed everything. This is the story of the most violent prison in America.